drink water, think crystal water. For energy and health, you need to drink water throughout the day. Crystal water is the most consistent and best tasting water in Belize, trusted to refresh you and your family. Think water. Think crystal water. With 11 stages of purification to offer you the peace of mind you deserve, crystal water is the taste you can trust.
Stay healthy while traveling. Frequently wash hands with soap and clean running water or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Avoid touching eyes, nose, and mouth. Avoid close contact with persons suffering from any cold or flu-like symptoms. Avoid travel if you have any cold or flu-like symptoms. Avoid travel unless absolutely necessary to any location that currently has local spread of the COVID-19. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or nearest health center and share your travel history. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health.
So did you know that Sagicor has a plan that can help to protect your income against the life-threatening illnesses that we face today and help you to access medical care? Please don't hesitate. Call me at cell phone number 614-1834 for more information on what's available.
I had a really good time tonight.
So did I.
Life moves fast. Be prepared with Sagicor. Learn more at sagicorlife.com.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Matters. This morning we are broadcasting from the comforts of our homes. This morning we thought we would go out and talk a little bit about money because money is important to everybody, but that seems to be one of the things that we have a little less of for some people, and for some people they have none in these times. Our guest this morning is Ervin Perez. He is an economist. He's the managing director of Legacy Fund. Mr. Perez, good morning and welcome.
Hi, good morning, Rhonda. How are you?
I am wonderful. All right.
Okay. That's true.
Where you are today, we know that you're Belizean, but you are not in Belize.
Yes, well, I am currently resident in Florida, United States. But still part of the global experience with the COVID pandemic in general.
All right, before we get into the COVID, let's learn a little bit about Ervin for the people that may not know who Ervin Perez is. Tell me a little bit about your schooling and what got you involved in this scope of work.
Well, I love finance from a very young age, finance and economics, but did my first set of degrees in the sciences. Later in life, did a master's in financial economics at Carleton. Spent 4.5 years working at the central bank as a bank examiner, and then another 3.5 years working at Scotiabank in the commercial banking. Branched off to work with the Credit Union League in working on developing a microfinance infrastructure in Belize for about 3 years, and then started my own financial advisory firm, Legacy Fund Limited, with the focus on trying to continue to build the financial markets in Belize, provide more flexibility for savers and producers. And we've done some work in terms of building that market with municipal bonds, education bonds that some Belizeans may be familiar with. And recently, we syndicated with Alpha, a limited liability partnership that I'm also with in terms of steering Belize City Council in issuing the first municipal papers in the Caribbean. These are just short-term borrowing instruments to support working capital needs for the municipality. And we accomplished that just before the kind of meltdown with the pandemic. So the launch of those papers was March the 16th, and they were successfully closed about a week ago.
Congratulations, and again, welcome.
No problem. Thank you.
Well,
it's good to
now you know who Ervin is to some degree. Ervin, this morning I want to talk about Belize. And I would imagine that when the people listen to what you have to say about Belize, I think some of this will spill over to other Caribbean countries because we have similar economy, we have similar things that we depend on. But I would like to start with the, the basics. And my first question for you is, what is your perspective on the competitive advantage of Belize now and after COVID?
So importantly, I don't think there's no fundamental change in Belize's competitive advantages post-COVID. To a large extent, this COVID pandemic has generated for the world and Belize what we'd call an external shock, which is something unexpected in terms of how the economy was operating, and an internal shock. So the external shock is the whole collapse of travel, and therefore the revenues that will be flowing through the tourism sector. And then the internal shock is the policies of the local governments in most countries to close the economy, to restrict traveling and implement social distancing, and therefore shutting down your domestic economy in all aspects. But the fundamentals of that economy has not significantly changed. Now, what it does provide, however, post-COVID, I believe, is an opportunity to improve the competitiveness and to understand perhaps we should not put too much of our eggs in the tourism services as a major generator of economic growth and foreign exchange, primarily because it is a very volatile industry. And if you're looking at long-term development, like with just a comparative with other CARICOM, small Caribbean islands that are so wedded to the tourism sector, you see that there's not a lot of traction in that direction. In 2008, there was a global financial collapse and the tourism services had a meltdown. And at the time, Belize's economy was only saved generally because oil production had just started, and the benefits of the oil revenues and foreign exchange was able to offset the collapse of the tourism foreign exchange earnings. In this particular case, that industry is no longer as vibrant, so it's not going to provide any buffers. And we do see that that the impact when your economy is so wedded to that part of that particular sector of the economy can be extensive, can be significant. And there is an opportunity for us to improve and invest in other sectors of the economy that will provide greater stability, like agriculture, agro-industry, agro-production, technology, IT, ICT, education, and health. So hopefully we will look at those opportunities. And when you talk about competitive advantage, we could think about competitive advantage with the other CARICOM countries. And I do believe I was listening to the interview with the chairperson, I believe, of Spanish Lookout, looking at how they saw the opportunity for them to expand production, domestic production of poultry, milk production, commodities, and sell into the Caribbean region. And so those are things I think we need to start significantly investing in and to actually use our competitive advantage with our regional trading partners to expand our economy and create a much more resilient economy.
Some people may say that while that sounds like the ideal answer, the population, the working population, may not be prepared to embark in a competitive nature in those fields.
Yes, and so that is why, Rhonda, this has to be a concerted effort, or what you'd call a dedicated effort to pivot, to change, just as they are institutions created to help drive the tourism services, like the Belize Tourist Board, BTIA, and the Belize Tourist Board generates and obtains a lot of financing revenues from the industry itself. They need to have a similar types of institutions or structures that will be both public and private to drive those industries, the agro sector, the agro production sector, the technology sector, which is huge. I mean, you and I can attest, the world can attest that given what we're all doing, the arguments for technology, ICT, has only been enhanced. And so there should be a tremendous drive towards building capacities in that area. So you're right. So at current, the capacities there might not be sufficient. And so what you're looking at is in your education processes, what opportunities you have for young Belizeans to not only be trained and skilled in these areas, but also to then work locally. But those are real competitive advantages, particularly the agro sector, when you talk about regional relationships, as opposed to tourism. Because if you think tourism, Rhonda, and our regional relationship with our CARICOM partners, every other CARICOM country except perhaps Trinidad and Guyana, tourism for them is a huge part of their industry. So we're competing against each other generally in that sector. However, if you look at the small islands like Trinidad, even Jamaica, the Eastern Caribbean islands, they cannot compete in agriculture vis-a-vis what we would be able to do if we put the effort in doing it.
Do you think that this might be an opportunity for CARICOM to look at the barriers that they have right now in terms of tariffs?
Absolutely. This is the time to really consider if we're serious about the single market and economy. And we know that there's not only tariff barriers, but we talk about these non-tariff barriers, that have been set up to prevent, for example, us exporting poultry into Jamaica or exporting poultry to Trinidad, because these countries are also still trying to protect their small poultry industries. And we need to kind of look beyond that in the CARICOM region and start thinking about a regional bloc. And within those regions, we're going to compete. And if Belize's poultry producers can produce chickens much more cheaper than Jamaica, than Trinidad, than the Eastern Caribbean, then our chickens will sell in the CARICOM markets. And that's how it is. They are probably going to be competitive in other areas that we're not. For example, Trinidad, in terms of petroleum technology, which they have had many years in building up their expertise in that area, natural gas production. So when you're collaborating as a region, obviously different regions, different countries will have other comparative advantages that they can compete. And we have to understand that, yes, being real, if your poultry industry, Rhonda, if Belize's poultry industry or grain industry is much more efficient than Jamaica or Trinidad or the Eastern Caribbean, what will happen is that the local producers in those countries will fall out of the market. They will not be able to survive. And we have to start accepting those conditions so that we can work as a region.
That just the sound of it, I can hear the battle that is going to be there already, because a lot of these countries, like most of the world, are struggling and they don't want to create more competition for themselves. It doesn't matter how great you are or how best you can serve the market. To bring something else into them would be like a new storm that's brewing, and a lot of these countries are not ready for that. So perhaps there has to be some other form of strengthening before we can move into that using.
Well, there's always been an argument in economics whether you should have gradualism or what you call shock therapy. Gradualism is what you're arguing for, in saying that you gradually open markets step by step to make it easier for people to accept change. It has been shown typically to fail, because what happens is that as minor changes are made, people become comfortable with not moving to the next stage and not moving to the next stage. And so there's always an argument to delay going to the next phase. We're not ready, just give the small farmers a little bit more opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. And so you don't end up changing anything. Now, shock therapy, as would suggest, usually results in sharp changes and a lot of dislocation. So the argument now usually is shock therapy with buffers, meaning that you allow the market to work, but you create safety nets to soften the blow for those that are now displaced out of a particular industry, but the industry has to be displaced so that your competitive advantages and the benefits of a regional block, for example, for Belize, make sense. Now you have to understand, right? So we may be extremely good, Rhonda, in agro production, but Trinidad is a better manufacturing hub than Belize because they have much cheaper energy costs and have a lot more experience in manufacturing. So they may be shipping a bunch of their manufactured products to us, which we then import from them. So, there is which may impact retail distributors here in the sense that if the Trinidadian manufacturers can also establish retail shops and have a competitive advantage, it may displace some of our own small manufacturing firms. So there's always a trade-off, you want to say. Part of the challenge, I believe, for the region, and I know we'll go past this, is also you must have labor being able to move. If you're going to create a regional block and you're going to have sharp dislocations of industries because of now competitive forces within that region working themselves out, then if labor can move, people can move from areas where there's a change in unemployment demand to areas where there's growth in unemployment needs. So employment needs, and one of the challenges in the region has been our unwillingness to allow that free flow of labor as well to parallel with the free flow of goods and services. All has to come together. I mean, think about it as a greater United States, a Caribbean states, where within the US, you can move within the states relatively easily if you're an American. There's no barrier between going from Florida to Georgia to California, etc. Each state have different laws and regulations on the state level that you then have to adjust to. But labor can move, goods can move. And it's kind of that we would have to start thinking of adapting in the Caribbean if we're going to be able to actually compete globally. So this gives us an opportunity, I think, for the Caribbean to reframe and to commit. Are we going down this path together? Are we just going to just give it all up and just try to battle our own canoe? And I think there's really an argument for working together, being so small in terms of the islands, and Belize, that is.
You speak about shock therapy. This is definitely shock therapy, not only for the individual countries, but for us as a group. And that, when I say us, I mean the CARICOM nations. What we're going to do, we're going to take a break.
Persons at risk of becoming seriously ill from the flu or the coronavirus, people over the age of 60, persons with medical conditions they already had, such as diabetes or heart disease or conditions that has made their immune system low, such as HIV or cancers. At this time, there is no vaccine or treatment. Serious cases may need oxygen or ventilator support. Be caring and show support for your elderly loved one during this time. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health.
I choose Happy Cow cheese because of its perfect portion sizes, and I can travel with it.
Because it's nice and soft and creamy, and it goes smooth on your bread.
I choose Happy Cow cheese because I eat it with my beans. I eat it with my fried jack. And you know why? Because it's nice.
Most of all, when you're on the plane, they only give you some crackers, and you could just take one out and enjoy it with Happy Cow cheese.
I'm Miss Baker, and I choose Happy Cow cheese because it goes well with all the stuff I bake.
Happy Cow cheese. Look for it in a store near you. Distributed in Belize exclusively by Emilio Ahmad and Sons Limited.
I chose Galen because of its strong reputation. Great scholarships.
I came because I can take all my classes online.
Because Galen University opens doors to the outside world.
Their course offering in tourism.
It gives me more opportunity to become who I want to be.
If you want to connect with your inner champion to make the world a better place, then Galen is right for you.
Welcome back to Morning Matters. Ervin Perez in with us this morning talking money. And when he says money, he doesn't mean the small money in your pocket, but how we will continue to make money after this pandemic has passed, because this will pass. Nothing is permanent, and definitely COVID is not permanent. So in a short time, this will be behind us, and we will have to find a way to move on. When I say we, I mean everybody. Again, welcome back, Ervin.
Thank you. It's good to be
Again,
here.
we notice that this is a time when governments, they, like everybody else, they're scrambling, and I use the term very loosely because nobody could have expected this. And one of the things that a lot of the governments, especially in the Caribbean, are doing, they're providing food, they're providing immediate assistance, if you want to call it that. What do you think that governments can do that would be more wholesome to assist the community other than giving them a loaf of bread a day?
So what can our government do? I think there's two important things that can still be done by the government of Belize. The first is to continue and implement what I would call sound monetary and fiscal policy within the constraints, because there's a lot of constraints in terms of fiscal space and within what we call a fixed monetary regime. So Belize has a fixed exchange rate. So there's not a lot of movement that the government can do from the money value side. But I think even more critical, and I'll go talk a little bit more back about what I think in terms of monetary and fiscal policy, but from the credit market, Rhonda, I think a very important, absolutely important decision that the government can do through the regulatory institution, the monetary authority, is what I call freeze the credit market. What does that mean? It means that debt service arrangements within the commercial banks, the credit unions, and any other lending institution should be halted, mandatory. What that would do for business is twofold, because at this time, most businesses have no idea of what's happening on their revenue side. The whole revenue side of the business is in free fall, right? So most businesses that have any kind of commercial credit arrangements, whether with the commercial banks or the credit unions, would have a tremendously difficult time to meet debt service payment. So a mandatory freeze, and let me go back, on 18th of March 2020, the central bank issued measures for financial sector amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And what the central bank put forward is kind of a more discretionary, voluntary policy by the commercial banks, I would assume, and the credit unions to look at each individual case or commercial case of loans, and I think personal as well, and determine with that borrower what they could do in terms of managing the interest and principal payments. So some sort of moratorium on debt service, right? What I am advocating for the government of Belize to be able to do is literally what we call a mandatory freeze of all interest and principal payments within the commercial bank, and for both commercial loans and personal loans. So that would help both businesses as well as private individuals, no? And that would be for the next 4 months. However, they should allow what you call voluntary exemption. So me as a particular person or as a businessman might say, or businesswoman might say, you know what, I can continue to service my debt, and I don't want to participate in this mandatory debt freeze on my interest and principal, and know that 4 months down the road, I still owe the same amount of funds, plus maybe the accumulative interest. So you would allow the ability of individuals and companies to exempt out of, but it would be across the board. What that does is, for a period of 4 months, it frees up cash flow for both the businesses and the individuals to focus on their most pressing cash flow needs. Now, what would that do for the bank? We understand that for banks, and we just looked at the central bank 2019 December quarterly data, that banks and credit unions earn money, Rhonda, from two main sources, what you call interest income. So those are the income that is coming from all of those loans, credit cards, etc. And from what you call non-interest income, which are usually transactional fees. So, you know, when you go to a bank might charge you a monthly fee just to maintain a checking account, or they will charge you for doing a wire transfer, etc. So those are non-interest income. So non-interest income only constitutes about 24% of the bank's total revenue per particular quarter. And so if we extrapolate that, it would be about, say, 30% of their overall revenue. So interest revenue accounts to about 70% of banks and commercial and credit unions revenue. So if there is a moratorium, a freeze on those payments, that component of the commercial banks and the credit unions revenue will be frozen, will be taken away. That would create some cash flow issues for those financial institutions. And what we are suggesting further is that the central bank then provides a line of credit, low interest line of credit, to those regulated financial institutions. So those are the commercial banks that the central bank regulates, and the credit unions. And these low interest line of credit would allow these banks to borrow now from the central bank window to be able to replace some of the cash flow that they would have lost because of this mandatory freeze. And that allows the entire credit market, Rhonda, to have what you would call a orderly transformation during this COVID period. If the central bank or the government allows, I believe, the financial institutions to determine their own path, the damage to the economy will be far more severe than if you create an organized mechanism to manage. Because what happens in that 4 months freeze is a lot of things change. We would be able to see over time, maybe a gradual reduction of social distancing, some sort of return to normal. We know in the tourism services and the tourism sector that may be next year, but at least in the short run for some other businesses, things may start to normalize. And so then at the period, maybe a month before the 4 months freeze, there could be an evaluation again of how the credit market is, and then determine whether that 4 months should be rolled again. Now, remember, two things is happening here. The banks are not, or the financial institutions, both the credit unions and the banks are not losing revenue. The revenues have only been frozen, right? Such that I don't have to, as a person, you don't have to meet your payments, but you're not defaulting, right? You're not defaulting because this is a policy. So you can then focus your cash flow on the most important needs. Sorry, Rhonda.
No, that's fine. I think the banks have taken that, some of the banks have taken that position for the people that have their loans and that sort of things. But I think the people's position, like yesterday I was talking to somebody, and their concern is after the 4 months, remember now, they've, as a person that has a mortgage, they've not been making any money. And then this money becomes due at some point in time. And their concern is that there is also an interest that comes along with this. So perhaps there could be something done to the interest in the consideration of the time that we are going through.
Absolutely. So what we are suggesting is that the interest component is not capitalized. So typically when a bank provides, or a financial institution provides interest or principal moratorium, they tend to capitalize the interest on the principal, which increases your overall debt. And if you translate that over 4 months, if you have a large facility, that can be significant. So this would argue for this freeze, including a separation of the interest from the principal. So the interest would not be capitalized on the principal, but would be set aside in some special interest reserve funds. So that as a overall credit market, we could then determine how we're going to deal with that interest component. It could be that looking down the road 4 months and looking at where the economy is, there is a general consensus that there has to be some sort of sharing of losses, meaning that the banks will not be able, or the financial institutions, I should say, will not be able to collect on all that interest that has built up. And there might be what you call a kind of sharing, a head cut reduction of the interest that is payable, etc. Again, that would have to be determined, I would say, when you're looking 4 months. The other thing is that, yes, individuals would be worried about the payments, but all that would happen, Rhonda, let's assume that you had a 12 months loan, right? And in 12 months, that loan will have been paid off. All that would happen is that now that loan is pushed back 4 months. So there's not a change in terms of total debt owed. It's just the timing of the payment has been pushed back for everybody 4 months down the road to allow some kind of normalization to take place in the economy, because at this point, the economy is absolutely in a free fall. There is no clear understanding when that would be able to normalize. And you have to understand that this is based on policy, right? So there is a policy set by the government to social distance, to close your business. And so there's nothing you can do. This is coming from a policy perspective.
People are waiting and sitting at home and thinking, what is the government going to do to make this economy better, or whichever economy they're sitting in. But what do you think we as individuals can do to assist in making our economy better?
I think this is absolutely a time, Rhonda, to purchase as much local products as possible. Belizeans, because we're going to have a challenge with foreign exchange, and we have a huge import consumption content. What that means is that about 80% of all that we consume actually is imported, which has to be paid by foreign dollars, US dollars. Given that there is a complete collapse of the tourism industry, given that the agricultural sector from the previous year was having challenges and will have challenges again this year because of the potential drought conditions, we know that foreign exchange is going to be in high demand and will be very difficult to obtain. Government will have to borrow foreign dollars to be able to meet certain wage bills and government expenses that will come up, like the interest expense for the super bond or the 2034 bond coming in August. So how we can help, how Belizean consumers can help, is as much as possible purchase local. So if you can get not beans in the tin, but the old or kidney beans, and you boil that up from the beans, if you can get, buy the local Mennonite cheese, see how much local milk that you can consume. As much as possible, local, your basket should be as local as possible. Vegetables, local products, try to reduce consumption of processed goods, because the processed goods have a foreign dollar component. Now, because we have such a high import consumption, obviously that's going to be a challenge for a lot of Belizeans, and how feasible that would be and how much impact that will have, remains to be seen. But if every house will make a commitment to trying to think that way, so instead of, I don't know what the local markets are in Belize, but instead of buying, your peanuts or cashew in the packed container, you might try to get local peanuts and local cashew. So that would be my argument for what the individual can do.
One of the things that I see, and I think is one of the biggest challenges for one of the local producers, is toilet paper. And it's funny, we have two companies that produce local toilet paper, but if you go on the shelves, those are toilet papers that are on the shelves still. All imported toilet papers are gone. So we definitely, speaking of local, that just came to my mind that, the people need to use their own toilet paper. It is a must.
Yeah, that's a must. Those are basic things that we can do to reduce the foreign exchange outflows, which is what we'll have to do in the short run and collectively. So here, toilet paper is hard to find, period. So it's still hard to find. You have to try to go to the shops very early in the morning. And it's still a hit and miss on a particular day. But yes, if there are local producers of toilet paper in Belize, that's something basic that we can say, let's buy the local products. There are some, go ahead, Brenda, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, obviously there are some import content in that toilet paper, but it's much less than the one that is directly imported. And that company that is manufacturing that paper also employs local Belizeans, so it keeps them working, So we should do that.
We definitely should. I completely agree with Ervin. We have to use everything local. And a lot of the times why we didn't try the local thing is because we got caught up with the imported stuff. But if you start to use it, you might find yourself liking it and never switching back. We're going to take a break and be back.
Me and my Marie shops in Lake.
Me and my Marie Sharp in Indiana.
I'm in Rhonda Beach, California with my Marie Sharp.
Me and my Marie shops in Kabul, Afghanistan.
Me and my Marie shop that are Hertfordshire, England.
Me and my Marie shops in Taipei, Taiwan.
Marie Sharp, world-class products produced in Belize.
Did you know that it's best to keep the lumber stored in a dry place?
At KT Enterprises, all our wood is stored in an enclosed space to provide our clients with the highest quality.
We allow you to personally select your lumber if you choose, and we deliver countrywide.
Be it deck board, beams, and imported hardwoods such as red oak and white ash. At KT Enterprises, we provide you with the highest grade in treated pine, construction grade plywood, and imported hardwood, delivered to your door.
We continue to build Belize by reforesting its pine forest. Visit us today at 2.3 miles Iguana Creek Road, or give us a call at 671-0114 or 672-0114.
Reduce your risk of viral illness like the flu or the coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water or with an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing or sneezing with a tissue. Throw away, then wash hands immediately. Avoid close contact with anyone who has the cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or nearest health center and share your travel history. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health.
Think water. Think crystal water. For energy and health, you need to drink water throughout the day. Crystal water is the most consistent and best tasting water in Belize, trusted to refresh you and your family. Think water. Think crystal water. With 11 stages of purification to offer you the peace of mind you deserve, crystal water is the taste you can trust.
Hey! I bring your favorite for your lunch. I shared me.
Alright, thanks, but I'm really hungry right now.
You look frustrated. What going on?
Well, I won't be there far and I got lab bills to pay right now.
I might have a solution that can help you out.
Well, you must have got direct line to Jesus then, because this one, yeah, miracle.
Not quite. But I know First Stop Speedy Money.
Well, please tell me about that.
First Stop Speedy Money is a pawn shop that is designed to help you on days just like this.
Really?
Yes, you know they pawn gold jewelry, bracelet, earring, they even do pawn and drive. This means you have full use of your vehicle and still get money.
Joe, you make it so easy?
It is easy.
Hey, yo.
Let's go check it out right now.
Visit First Stop Speedy Money at Capital Garden Plaza on Constitution Drive in Belmopan or at 10 King Street in Belize City. Welcome back to the third and final segment of Morning Matters. Ervin's still in here with us this morning. Ervin, again, welcome back. In this segment, Ervin will stay a little bit on some of the things that we've been seeing, but I want to go back a little bit. This is a time when the government, they're paying, I think, $150 every 2 weeks to people that had jobs that lost their jobs during this time. People primarily in the tourism industry. Do you think that perhaps it would have been, I don't want to say a better way, but it probably would have provided more benefit had they thought about giving the same money to the employers? So the employers have this $150 every 2 weeks. Some of them may have been able to say, then, you know what, I can match it, or I can add another $75 and still keep you active, and or do something more to while the doors are shut, we are still doing something and we still feel like a part of this business. And I say this because a lot of times what will happen eventually is that these people will lose their jobs. And a lot of these people that loses their jobs, loses their health insurance and other insurance that they have because that is paid by the employer. So they're not only losing their job, they're losing more. But had they been kept on and the money comes through the employer, at least they would have been able to hold on to something as important as their insurance.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Rhonda. I mean, that has been a big argument even here. But clearly, there was a view whether the funds should go to the employees or unemployed directly or through the businesses based on a policy of retention of employees. So they would only have been able to access these support. This is the small business in Belize, the hotels and so forth, if they have agreed to maintain their current staffing. The challenge, the benefits or the upside to that would have been, right, you have a lot of companies being kept whole through this period, such that, if the employees are lost over the period, there's a certain sort of hollowing out of these companies, trying to, down the road, find back these employees, etc. So that was an argument that was made. I think the counter position to that was simply planning, right? That would have required a little bit more foresight and planning going forward. Most employers reacted kind of quickly to seeing the upcoming challenge by starting to reduce staff, as opposed to, and then what would have been, the response would have to have been quicker to say, okay, here's a program we're setting up. We want you to maintain your employees, and we're going to provide a subsidy and support to help you over the next 4 months, and we'll revisit it at that time. Yeah, definitely would have been a better way of going forward, and maintaining more companies whole through the COVID period.
Definitely. And I think one of the ways it would have assisted as well is right now we're faced with this challenge of verifying that Ervin Perez worked for Scotiabank, verifying that Ervin Perez worked at the Crichton or wherever he works.
Yep.
Had the money gone through his employer, he would have known Ervin Perez. He would have put Ervin Perez's name on the list and the money would have gone to Ervin Perez right away. So that would have eliminated the person having to wait maybe now 5 weeks before they can get the first $75. So what that is behind us now, but perhaps it is something that can be considered for going forward because we don't know what will happen in the next leg, if there is a next leg. So perhaps that might be something that business people would want to suggest to the government in the interest of keeping their businesses whole, but also in the interest of helping to sustain the people that worked or works for them.
And one of the things that you kind of hint on, which is absolutely true, is that the infrastructure would have already existed.
Yes.
Right? It's a lot easier to transfer $20 million to 1,000 employers than $20 million to 60,000 people. So, and the infrastructure would have already been there. You have your payroll, you have your banking information on your employees. It's a matter of, getting the funds and then distributing it. The other thing, as you have said, that some employers, based on where they are and their ability to, and their cash buffers, may have been able to top it up, as you said. So, an employee might get maybe 60-70% of their salary as opposed to maybe 20% at the end of the day. The third thing, I think, with the option that you're proposing, it could be possible to have made these part grant, part loans, because at the end of the day, right, these monies have to be paid back by the government, right? And somebody has to pay. So if the employers would have said, we're willing to do this, let's do some kind of soft loan, soft grant. If things normalize and we get back on our feet and things are okay, there'll be some forgiveness of amount, but maybe we'll pay back a small 10-20%, which would help the overall public purse in meeting the final payment when those come due.
Do you think it is something that still can be implemented in the future if the need arises?
So our view, and I think everyone is starting to think that pandemics, unless there is some change in eating habits in some of the Asian countries, and how we interact with some of the animals that we eat, might be more of something that we see again, right? So we're having this is like learning lessons for everyone globally. How do we respond to something as wild scale as this? And definitely that should be part of the business plan or the strategic plan in terms of responding to a future pandemic. How do we distribute funds in the economy, given maybe we have to shut down the economy for a period?
Well, hopefully we don't get to experience this again, but in the event we do, we'll be better prepared. This is a time when some businesses will make it, and then some businesses will fizzle and die out if they have not died already. In your opinion, what are some of the businesses that will see and pass this time with very small impact?
For me, I think that our business will have some impact because of the size of the shock. But clearly businesses that are in the healthcare services, businesses that are in IT services, should have, there may be some reduction in revenues because they may be providing kind of subsidy services to ensure a lot of homes have internet or have higher bandwidths, etc. But in this time, you're seeing where the need for tech and online services are at a high. So the values of programmers and those who support the whole ICT industry, to me, has gone up. In the tourism services, as you said, there's going to be a lot of businesses that may not have had the kind of buffers to be able to survive this shock and will be out of the industry. But I think at the end of the day, they will be replaced by new investors going back into that industry. Some retail shops may also, small, retail shops may come out of the business. But the way how the way how the retail sector has been developed in Belize, we can see that there's an informal conglomerate system there. So I think they would they will bounce back and they will move forward. So unless we intentionally as a country start focusing on other areas, I think post-COVID, the Belizean economy will look a lot like what it did before COVID, right? Except that there might be a change in players in different sectors.
We're a country that depended, and I have to say depended because no, we don't have to, we depended a lot on tourism. Do you think, so we put tourism as the biggest and the most important thing, we invest a lot in tourism. When you look at it now, how important do you think tourism will be to this society in the future?
Well, at current, as you have said, and over the recent 15 to 20 years, the tourism industry has been looked at as the driver of the economy. S&P, which just recently downgraded Belize's credit rating from B- to CCC and negative, had the tourism sector as 10 to 15% of Belize's GDP. Locally, we have heard numbers of 25%. Its impact on the GDP, its account for the GDP is about 25%. So that means it's extremely significant. One in $4 generated in the economy is a tourist dollar. So this unexpected sharp downturn has exposed how tied the economy has been to the tourism services and the tourism sector, from everything from the support services to the tour operators to small villages where tourists have what you call experiential tourism, to the parks, to the little shop sellers of memorabilia around the different sites that people visit, all to the hair braiders, and it goes on and on and on. But clearly, I think, as we have been arguing sometime, that tying our economic development to such a volatile industry perhaps is not the wisest of approach. Tourism has its merits and should not be abandoned as an industry. The whole global pandemic shows the human desire for travel. People love to travel and experience new things. That will never change, right? So tourism will always be a good industry to have, but whether it should be one of our main pillars for a resilient economy, I think has to be seriously questioned. And so now we have to look at the other sectors, for me, that I thought have generally been abandoned by the wayside. No, the only reason why we are somewhat sufficient, self-sufficient in agriculture is because of the Mennonites, and it's their own initiative and their own collaboration to a great extent that has resulted in that. It has not been a public policy, private policy driven agenda, and that we can't say the same for tourism. Tourism, there are public entities like the BTB that's focused on marketing, focuses on new markets. They're all over the place trying to open markets, open air routes, etc. Is the same level of energy taking place in the agro sector? I doubt it, and I think now is the time to start looking at that. And in the technology sector as well, is the same drive? Is there a national tech foundation that is trying to push technology both in the schoolroom, in businesses, in programmers? I think we have to look at those things now, Rhonda.
In your opinion, do you think that the government should abandon the moratorium on offshore drilling during this time?
Well, that's a very weighted question, but I was not one for a moratorium. I'll just say my personal opinion. I was not one for a moratorium on offshore drilling. There's a philosophy that we have: use it or lose it, right? So if you're going to put a moratorium on something, then there has to be a compensation to the poor Belizean boy on the street who will now not have perhaps a better social service because the government has decided to set those revenues aside. So to me, it's always a trade-off. If there's an advocate group pushing for a moratorium for resources that could have been brought to bear to help meet investments in social infrastructure such as health, education, etc., and you decide not to make those investments, then those advocates pushing for that moratorium needs to show how we're going to provide alternative revenues to meet those same needs. So perhaps it was externally driven lobby effort, and in terms of the local consideration and view of what you're giving up and how you're going to replace those were not really taken into consideration. But given where oil prices are now, maybe it's better to be left in the ground. So at this morning, WTI prices were trading at $13 to $14 a barrel. That is the lowest since 1998. So there's such a glut of oil on the market that it may be better in that ground for a longer period of time.
It might be safer for everybody. Before we go, I have a few more questions, maybe one or two. One of the ones that I want to ask before we leave, this is also a time, I know we spoke about it a little bit earlier, that people are being laid off. Do you think that maybe the private businesses can share the weight? So I work 2 days, you work 2 days, the other person works 2 days, but we still get our 2 days salary, but we're still kept on. As opposed, they send me home, they keep you, they send the next man home, and then you get to work 6 days.
I mean, I think, Rhonda, you're exactly right. Everywhere, if the community can come together and share the pain of this shock, everybody's going to be better off, as you said, no? So again, if the employer would be able to sit down with their staff and collaborate with their staff to say, how do we share this pain that we're all going to have to, because our cash flow has been cut by half. So we either lay off half the workers or we get half the time. Everybody gets half the time. And the workers are willing to share. I think just from a moral and point of view, you're going to have a lot a better feelings around communal feelings when we are on the other side of the pandemic, right? So I think it's a good idea. Now, like you and I know, it will be based on circumstances. There might be some employees that the owner had wanted to get rid of a long time. So, they were not pulling their weight. So let's get him rid of now. But you're right. I think in the public sector, there can be some of this kind of cost sharing as well in terms of time. It's just a completely unusual circumstance. So we're going to have to, like you say, think innovatively, think outside the box. Like consider that we're working on a clean white sheet, and how do we get out of this together? I think it's always a better way to look at it. Yeah.
Ervin, we're winding down. Before we go, I'd like to know what this experience has taught you, the COVID experience.
Well, one thing it has taught me is, I remember Mose and I, we had this Monday show, and then we went on Tuesday, and we kept saying, save for a rainy day, save for a rainy day. Have 3 months or so stashed aside somewhere, just because you don't know what's coming down the pipeline. And then we said it, and people would call in, and I don't know how much value people had put on it. I'm glad to say that I had taken a little bit of my medicine and kind of kept saving, because and so it has taught the power of having some saving, because when nothing is happening, you're a little bit more comfortable if you feel I can manage a couple months until things straighten out. The other thing, though, it has taught me is how people can really come together. Our communities can really come together. And I hope in Belize, what I'm seeing, where the government in office had reached out earlier today to the opposition party and brought them aboard. I don't know how fully aboard, but aboard how they were going to respond. It says the need for us to work across party lines, across ethnic lines, across class lines as a Belizean community, and work together. We'll all get out of this better off if we do that. And again, most importantly, it has taught us the value of family, right? Hopefully we're all going to be better off spending so much time together with our families. And we do miss our friends and the things that we love to do beyond the family, but yeah, the value of family.
Ervin, again, I say thank you, and hopefully we get to do this a little bit more often, since technology has been kind to us.
Very true. Very true.
Ervin, have a lovely day. Until next time, we encourage you to take care of yourselves and each other. This is Rhonda along with
Ervin Perez.
Say goodbye.
Gonna be my wife, and I was gonna be